Good evening once more and welcome to the broadcast. My name is Abdiaziz. Hashim, sign language interpreter. At the bottom end of the screen is Joyce Warimum. And we start with that Maraga bombshell. Now, former Chief Justice David Maraga said he will remember President Uhuru Kenyatta as one who has no regard for the law, even as he faulted his selective appointment of judges nominated by the Judicial Service Commission. Now, Maraga further noted that Kenyatta's action highlights his continued violation of the Constitution and has the potential of killing the judiciary and sinking the country into anarchy.
Even before the dust settles on the scathing attack on the president by the retired Chief Justice Dr. William Mutunga,
tukikubali rais aendelee vile anaendelea, hii kitu tukiachana na aendelee na hii iwe kama kitu ya kawaida, italeta shida Kenya hii.
Another salvo by the other retired Chief Justice David Kenani Maraga.
Because when you keep quiet, if Justice Mutunga kept quiet, if we keep quiet, and we are seeing the country sliding into anarchy, can I come later and say, I wish I said?
The latest row between the ex-president of the judiciary and the head of state being the failure by the latter to approve the appointment of 6 out of the 41 nominated judges by the Judicial Service Commission. So
now, when you come with to the appointment of judges, the president is role in the appointment of judges. Is ceremonial. It is ceremonial. That is the black letter of the law.
Yeah. The row, which has been in the headlines for over 2 years now, took a new twist last Thursday after President Kenyatta swore in 34 judges. Maraga opening up on why he went for all or none.
And I said no. Because if I allowed that, I would myself be violating the Constitution. I would be like telling or giving the president the liberty to, whenever any list is sent, and he looks at the list and he sees this fellow keeps ruling against the government, let's leave him out. And that's the president that would be set.
Tonight, the two former Chief Justices are not having it lying down, with Maraga choosing to side with his predecessor.
I agree with every word in that statement. I've read it. I've read it carefully. I agree with every word in that statement.
Maraga's opening up continues, causing an uproar online after he made hard-hitting comments about the president, who he says leaves behind a poor legacy.
I'm sorry to say that I will remember him as a president who had no regard for the law. It's unfortunate, but that's a fact.
It is now a wait and watch to see if the president will yield to the pressure or whether the country will have to live with his president.
It is the duty of Parliament, when the president has violated the Constitution, to take steps and remove him.
To impeach the president.
To impeach the president.
Now let's head over to corridors of Parliament, where Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani is expected to read the 2021-2022 budget on Thursday before the National Assembly. This year's budget will be the second to be read under the COVID-19 pandemic, which has heavily affected the country's economy. In the budget finance bill that was presented before Parliament for consideration, a 3.63 trillion budget was proposed, which the Cabinet Secretary said will strike a balance between stimulating economic recovery and responding to the health challenges caused by the virus. Now, Yatani has allocated 1.879 trillion to the executive, while 37 billion to Parliament and 17 billion to the judiciary.
That if you look at the revenue estimates as they were last year, revised with the first supplementary budget at 1.594. Honorable Speaker, we are yet to get to that level of 1.594 with only about 3 weeks of revenue collection remaining this year, and maybe about 2 weeks without counting the last week of the year, the financial year.
Speaker, let's face the fact. Because as leaders, we will be counted. We will be remembered for putting this country into the worst debt crisis. Mr. Speaker, there's no way we are going to implement the 2021-2022 budget without raising the debt ceiling to 9 trillion. And I want this House to listen to me, or more. Speaker, as we speak here, this House has raised the ceiling to 9 trillion. As we sit here, outstanding public debt as of June 2021 is 8.6 trillion. As we sit here today, by adopting this report, we have indirectly altered the debt ceiling. It's as plain as that.
To the tune of 3.6 trillion, out of which we informed that through our own internal revenue collection processes, we may be able to raise about 1.8 trillion or so, while the rest definitely is going to be funded through borrowing. There is hue and cry in this country when it comes to borrowing, because every Kenyan feels we have actually overborrowed, and it is the high time we put a close to this borrowing menace or spree that we get into every day. And at the same time, Kenyans are also saying they are overtaxed. Therefore, there must be a remedy from Parliament as regards taxation.
Insofar as this executive is concerned, Madam Speaker, I think it is fair for Kenyans to know that the role of this House actually in terms of budget-making process is that of rubber stamping. And therefore, in theory, yes, we are a budget-making House, but in practice, Madam Speaker, Kenyans need to know that actually the budget of this country is made by the executive, and of course the buck stops with the president, who has appointed the Treasury CS.
Now, still with those budget estimates, Kenyans are optimistic that the budgetary statement to be read tomorrow will address the welfare of the common man by reducing the cost of living through tax exemptions and reliefs on essential items. Expectations are high that taxations on items like cooking oil and wheat flour should be reduced, while raising the tax of non-essential items such as cigarettes and alcohol.
For many people, budget reading is an annual ritual that the Cabinet Secretary for Finance reads every year. But the ritual seems to be doing little to lighten the burden of the ever-rising cost of living.
Kabla waisome, wapunguze, kuna vitu zingine tunaona shida sana. Kwa sababu hata saa zingine ulikuwa unalemewa unataka kwenda kwa soko na ni 500 umeenda umebeba 500 unataka kwenda kuokota zenye unaweza okota ama nyanya, vitunguu, nini uze.
Karo, a deep-sea slum resident, stated that the recent hike of prices of fuel was hurting the common man because transporters and traders had passed the additional cost to consumers, leading to an increase of the prices of basic commodities.
Naye saa zingine unaweza lemewa unataka kuchukua pikipiki, ulikuwa unaenda na 100 ama 50, lakini sasa unasikia ni 200. Sasa hata unashindwa. Tafadhali hapo tulikuwa naona kwa upande yangu murekebishe pande ya mafuta kwanza.
She projects reduction of fuel prices in the 2021-2022 budget, which will be tabled at Parliament tomorrow.
Penye anafaa kukupeleka kama kutoka hapa hadi Westlands, anakuitisha 150 ama 200, saa zingine una. Na ako serious tu juu mafuta imepanda.
The negative impact of COVID-19 on the private sector has trickled down to household welfare via reduced job opportunities. Karo, who does house chores at the neighboring leafy suburb of Westlands, says she's now jobless due to COVID-19.
Sasa mtu kama mimi wa biashara, pia saa zingine unapata vitu zimepanda design nyingine hata unashindwa. Naye kazi hata hakuna. Kazi hakuna na unasomesha watoto. Ukiangalia huku unga venye iko, unga venye tulikuwa tunanunua hata 70, 80, saa hizi ni 100.
For now, she has to toil and moil to make ends meet as she has 3 children to take care of.
Nashinda hata watoto, naye saa zingine watoto hata inabidi wanalala njaa juu. Sasa mtoto atafanya namna gani? Juu unapata unapika uji, juu ya njaa hakuna. Sasa ile ilibaki kidogo na inabidi upike tu uji. Sasa zingine uji yenyewe haina sukari. Sasa mtoto anaenda kama analalamika kabisa.
Other residents of the area stated that initially with 200 shillings they could afford a number of things in the market, but for now they could afford little.
Hii COVID-19 unajua kuna wakati nilikuwa nafanya kazi, sasa ikabidi hata hao Wahindi wameogopa. Sasa unarudi tu unakaa chini tena. Wameogopa, sasa hawana wafanyikazi, sasa wamekurudisha nyumbani.
This fiscal year's budget was gone high to 3.6 trillion shillings as compared to the 2020-2021 budget, which was 2.9 trillion shillings, while the 2019-2020 budget was 1.8 trillion shillings. Reporting for Ebru TV, I'm Abdurrahman Yusuf.
Abdurrahman Yusuf, thank you for that particular piece. Now, still with the budget, a section of lobby groups has put the government on the alert of giving a deaf ear on the COVID-19 immunization rollout in the country. Now, the groups say that the national budget, which is to be read tomorrow, has not given priority to curbing the COVID-19 virus through immunization of its citizens. Now, the lobbies say that instead of increasing the allocation of monies to the Ministry of Health, Treasury decreased the budget from 6.1% to 5.7% this financial year.
As Kenyans anticipate to see what the budget allocation for the financial year 2021-2022 has for them, calls have started being made by a section of Kenyans fighting for what they term as their rightful cut, especially amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. A section of lobby groups that comprise of the KMPDU and human rights activists are now saying the budgetary allocation each year has seen the health sector wallow in its operational difficulties due to continued slashing. The group now says with the pandemic at hand, the government has continued to place a deaf ear in the fight against the global virus, following the minimal allocation that the health sector will receive from the 2021-2022 financial year.
We are deeply worried that despite the shocks to all aspects of life and livelihoods due to COVID-19, the national budget healthcare, including what is spent at the county level, is still at 8%.
The 8% allocation for the health sector has seen a shave of a deduction of 2 billion Kenya shillings, a deduction that they claim could hinder efforts for the sector to face out the COVID-19 pandemic.
From 6.1% of the total budget in 2020-2021 to 5.7% in the 2021-2022 budget. This is a close to 2 billion reduction when we are in the middle of COVID.
The lobby group has also raised a concern on the zero efforts the government has in ensuring every Kenyan receives the COVID-19 jab.
While there's mention of COVID-19 vaccine in the narrative section, the proposed budget has not specified any significant allocation for the purchase of the COVID-19 vaccine. To allocate a budget line of 1% for the purchase of COVID-19 vaccine for the entire adult population. In addition, allocate funds to subsidize the cost of COVID-19 testing and treatment and reduce the current burden on the thousands of Kenyans.
And to ensure the immunization process is looked into with the current budget allocation by providing a sum of 35 billion Kenya shillings for the exercise. In the last financial year, the health sector received a sum of 5.2 billion Kenya shillings to handle matters surrounding the health sector. And this year, with the pandemic ravaging the health sector is expected to maneuver through with a paltry sum of 3.4 billion Kenya shillings. Millie Kisenya for Ebru TV.
And away from the confines of the National Treasury, as we expect the CS tomorrow to read that particular 3.63 trillion budget that of course will bring you a wall-to-wall coverage in regards to that particular budget. Now to health matters, where the COVID-19 situation in Kisumu County is raising eyebrows among stakeholders in the Ministry of Health and policymakers in the country. Now with the Council of Governors now forming a multi-agency committee to ensure measures are put in place to contain the spread of the virus in Kisumu and other neighboring counties in the Nyanza region. And as Busara Naman now tells us, as Kenyans await for the 3.6 trillion budget set to be read tomorrow at Parliament buildings, the COG wants the Treasury to expedite the release of funds owed to the county governments.
Because by constraining expenditure, therefore, will not be stimulating growth. For us to continue supporting the economy, cushioning the economy, growing the economy, and supporting our
country.
Actually, we are now fully mobilized in the preparation for the problems which is happening in the 11 counties. And we are monitoring them very, very closely. And we are also asking for more assistance from the national government.
The chairman of the Council of Governors, Martin Wambura, says the trend is worrying. However, they have formed a multi-agency committee to ensure that measures are put in place to contain further spread of the virus.
We urge the residents of Kisumu and the other 10 neighboring counties, namely Siaya, Homa Bay, Migori, Kisii, Nyamira, Busia, Bungoma, Vihiga, Kericho and Bomet, to ensure strict adherence to the laid-down health protocols.
This comes after the Kisumu County Assembly was on Wednesday forced to adjourn its sittings for 2 weeks due to a spike in COVID-19 infections in the county. While announcing the move on Tuesday, Speaker of the Assembly, Leisha Oraro, urged leaders in the county to sensitize the public on the pandemic. And as Treasury CS Ukur Yatani is expected to read the 2021-2022 budget on Thursday before the National Assembly, the COG is calling upon the National Treasury to clear the outstanding amount of 105.6 billion owed to county governments.
As usual, number one is, of course, disbursement of county equitable share of revenue. Despite being only 3 weeks to the end of the financial year, the total outstanding amount owed to county governments is 105.9 billion. 105.9 billion.
Wambura says the situation has paralyzed activities in the counties, such as causing the accumulation of pending bills, delayed payments of salaries of all county staff, and it has slowed the implementation of development projects. The COVID-19 situation in Kisumu County is raising concerns among stakeholders, with the Council of Governors now urging neighboring counties within the Luo Nyanza region to be vigilant in bid to contain the spread of the virus. Reporting for Ebru TV, I'm Busara Naaman.
Now, still with health matters, Kenya has recorded 173,661 cases of coronavirus after 589 more people tested positive. Now, Health Cabinet Secretary Mutahi Kagwe said the new cases were from a sample size of 4,995 that was tested in the last 24 hours. Now, 312 patients have recovered from the disease, 184 from the home-based care and isolation care, while 128 from various health facilities. Now, this brings the total number of recoveries in the country to 118,933. Unfortunately, 19 patients succumbed to the disease, bringing the total number of fatalities to 3,345. To education matters now, Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha has reiterated that parents who are able to clear fee arrears in their schools should do so immediately. Now, the Cabinet Secretary says that only those who really can't afford to meet their payments should make an effort and individually liaise with their schools on how to find a way forward. He has, however, warned school heads from misreading his statements to create additional levies to parents, terming such move as criminal acts.
CS for Education George Magoha has warned school principals against creating additional levies to already struggling parents.
And I know for sure that the majority of people who are defaulting school fees for that school can afford to pay. There are a few students, maybe less than 10%, who must not be touched because they come from very indigent homes.
Magoha has reiterated that majority of parents who are yet to clear school fees arrears for their children are capable of doing so. According to him, exemptions should only be accorded to students that the school principals have ascertained come from poor families and those whose parents have lost their jobs.
So those who can afford to pay must pay. They have to pay. All this politics, you forget about it. And I said, you pay the fee balances. Any teacher who is doing an additional levy, treat that as a criminal act. If you find a child sent home for an additional levy, that's now between the teacher and the law.
The education boss urged principals to be vigilant in confirming backgrounds of the students before they send them home to collect fees balances.
Don't say, how will a teacher know whether the parent has been sacked? That person does not deserve to be a teacher. Because if you send the child home, the person will come back with the child and tell you, no, I used to work here, and I've been fired. And the government is saying, yes, the child will come back and learn. We shall absorb that cushion.
Magoha made the announcement at KICD headquarters while launching the first ever physical education and sport policy, where he now seeks to make physical education, PE, compulsory in primary and secondary schools. This comes even as the government recently released 2.8 billion shillings for primary schools and another 6.5 billion for free secondary school education. Lucy Riley, Ebru TV.
Now, the decision by Education Cabinet Secretary, that is Professor George Magoha, to order heads of schools to send home learners with fee arrears has elicited mixed reactions, with parents saying it will be difficult to meet the expenses amid the ravaging COVID-19 pandemic. Now, legislators have also joined the bandwagon in support of the parents by demanding answers about the declaration of the free education by the government. Our reporter Jeff Khaemba with more details of that particular story.
I want today to request on behalf of government that the Kenyan parents who are still denying paying the balance of their third-term school fees should please pay that fee without further delay.
It's an order that has sent chills and fears among parents with school fees arrears. Education CS George Magoha says principals have moral authority to send back the learners who have not cleared fees, but this, according to the parents, is a tall order.
Itaweza kuwa ngumu jamani, wasirudishwe nyumbani kwa sababu niko nao kama wote, niko na watatu. Wengine wawili hao wako secondary na mwingine ako primary. Jamani, sasa si hapo nitaumia kabisa. Hapo naweza umia, naomba tu waziri tafadhali wasirudishie watoto nyumbani kwa sababu hiyo yote sitaweza.
The decision by the CS has angered the legislators, who are now demanding for the answers on whether Magoha's remarks are part of the government order, according to Mvita Member of Parliament Abdul Samad Sharif Nasser and some attendant of Alego Songa.
Wazazi kwa sasa, Bwana Spika, wana shida. Haswa sasa uchumi umeweza kuzoroteka na mambo ya corona. Pesa za CDF, Bwana Spika, ambazo zafaa kusaidia kulipia karo hazijatoka zipasavyo. Hawa wazazi na wanafunzi, Bwana Spika, watasaidika vipi?
I think in this country, in this government, we have very, very insensitive officers. Some of these officers are really candidates for impeachment.
Julius Mawade, the Embakasi South Member of Parliament, and the nominated Member of Parliament Gideon Keter are concerned most of the students from the slum areas who solely depend on bursaries are likely to drop out should the government implement the order.
Because even if they go out of schools, they will not get the money. There's no money.
Ni jambo bovu sana. Hili ni jambo ambalo liko totally misguided. Sababu wazazi wengi wa mengine, especially kwa constituency yangu Embakasi South, wamesimamishwa kazi sababu ya factories za corona.
COVID-19 pandemic has been the excuse of most of the parents failing to pay school fees, but things are likely to get thicker if they are going to be compelled to do so, or else they will have to be forced to stay with their children at home.
Serikali yafanya nini kuhakikisha kila mtoto amesoma licha ya anapotoka wala uwezo wake? Pili, hizi kauli za waziri ni msimamo wa serikali ama ni kauli yake mwenyewe ya kibinafsi? Na tatu, lini waziri atarekebisha kauli yake na kuomba Wakenya msamaha?
More than 1 million learners will get Form 1 placements across the various secondary schools in the country. But before this, each and every parent will have to be armed with the school fees before a learner is admitted. The government has also disbursed about 9.3 billion Kenyan shillings across all the learning institutions in the country. Reporting for Ebru TV, I'm Jeff Haemba.
The Kenya National Examination Council, that is NEC, has appointed educationist Dr. David Njagere as the new Chief Executive Officer effective July 1st, 2021. His appointment was announced by the Council's chairpersons, Dr. John Onsati. Now, prior to the appointment, Dr. David was serving as the Education Advisor to the Cabinet Secretary at the Ministry of Education. He also taught at several secondary schools in Kenya for 7 years. David will take over from Masi Karongo, who has been the acting CEO since 2016. And on that note, we have to pay some bills. We'll be back with more news. Don't go too far. Ebru Primetime on this, the 9th of June 2021, continues after this short commercial break.